First up, we have Chris Reid, Managing Director of Neometals.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that kind introduction. I'd like to thank Bill and his team at Paydirt for putting on another excellent conference. Oh, mask off. Fair enough. Not sure what I'm doing with the masks, but anyway. So it gives me great pleasure to tell you about Neometals and how we plan to make greener materials for future generations, and more or less how we deliver solutions that enable that to happen. It's the normal speed reading test. That basically means just consult your broker before buying. So Neometals innovatively develops these opportunities that come up. We have a number of process technologies that focus on circular, sustainable materials recovery and recycling, and it really demonstrates our conviction to those ESG principles. We've made a conscious pivot away from more carbon-intensive upstream mining into more environmentally friendly materials recovery and recycling. The common intersect of all of the processing technologies, they produce battery materials, either for EVs or the stationary energy storage batteries. I'll tell you about three of those today: the lithium battery recycling technology that we have, the vanadium recovery, and the Eli lithium process. We have a number of, the first two are reaching development decisions this year. And with respect to the battery recycling, we're actually looking at multiple FIDs. And that's one of the beauties and how we've got this fantastic organic pipeline of projects that these technologies spawn. And we've got a strong team with a pretty enviable record of value creation and returning that value back to the shareholders. So here's our green battery materials portfolio. We've only got one sort of legacy asset in Australia, and that's the world's second highest grade hard rock titanium deposit. I won't tell you about that today, but I'll focus on our battery materials projects. First of all, our work in Germany and commercialising that with SMS Group. I'll then move to Pori, Finland for the vanadium recovery. And then down to Portugal with our work with Bondelti. As I said, we really bring this sustainability to heart. It's, we do walk the talk. So, all of our projects materially remove carbon from those footprints. In the battery recycling, we can pull more than 90% out of the traditional CO2 footprint. With the vanadium recovery project, we will be the only mine in the world that'll have a negative or zero carbon footprint. And with our lithium technology, we're probably going to strip out more than 50% of the existing carbon footprint. So we've done a number of sustainability reports, up for our third one this year. We report against the GRI and TCFD. Not sure what all of those acronyms mean. But, I do take comfort that, what we're doing has been internationally recognised. We made the finals of the German National Sustainability Award in December last year. We didn't win, but we did make the finals. In terms of a corporate dashboard, look, we've significantly outperformed the ASX 200 over the last several years, or the last 5 years. And we've returned more than $82 million back in cash and capital returns to the shareholders. So we're, the board of management and founders are large shareholders in the business and very well aligned to its continuing success. So we'll tell you about downstream battery, or the end of the supply chain. Most guys are talking about the front of it. We know a fair bit about the front of it because we developed Mount Marion with MinRes. We just thought that the other end of the supply chain was something that no one had really been looking at. So whilst the guys at MinRes were building Mount Marion in 2015, 2016, we moved into battery recycling at the other end. And it wasn't quite popular at that stage, but now it's very much popular. So we're commercialising the technology with SMS Group. They are a plant builder, 150 years old, 14,500 employees in 95 sites around the world. So they are the delivery arm for our business. We're more the brains, if you can possibly believe that. So, the issue with the EVs that sort of goes without saying and is under-publicised is the fact that they've got twice the carbon footprint of your internal combustion engine and only become a net benefit to the environment in year 7. That's because they've got batteries in them, and the batteries are made with predominantly mined materials that come from Australia and Indonesia and the Congo. And we need to reduce that. Now, the existing recycling where they burn it, like Umicore and Glencore, and then they get a dirty metal button and refine that, that's great. But they only get about 50% mass recovery, so that pulls about half the carbon out of it. Whereas our processes are looking to take 90 to 95% out. And the good thing is that, with Europe's new battery regulations, you're going to have technologies like ours by 2025 to be compliant. So I must have skipped a slide here. And so, why do we need to recycle? So other than removing the carbon footprint, there is a need that needs to be serviced. So the feed is generated, in the production process. So when they're making batteries, 10 to 20% scrap rate. It took Panasonic 5 years in the first Tesla Gigafactory to get that scrap rate below 20%. So that's your initial feed until you get the end-of-life cars coming back. And on the right-hand side there, you can see where that hockey stick and the inflection point is. And they're the cars that were made in 2016, 17, 18, starting to come back mid this decade. The dark green is the scrap from the European gigafactories. The light green is the end-of-life returns. The dark blue is the production scrap in North America. And the light blue is the end-of-life volume. So the Europeans are in front, the Chinese are in front. The Europeans are running second and the US is running third. So when we look at the need for a solution like ours, we look at in 2025 in Europe, they're going to need 335,000 tonnes of battery recycling capacity. As it stands today, there's about 70,000 tonnes. And you can't build new pyromet smelters in Europe. So hence why we're aiming for it. So the solution, that took a number of years of research and development. If we knew what we were doing, you wouldn't call it research and development. But we finally cracked the nut in 2019 in a year-long pilot plant at SGS Lakefield, Canada. We then ran a partner selection process and picked out what we thought was the linchpin, what would be the main bottleneck, and it wasn't feed. It was actually, can we build enough plants? Like, we've got a first mover advantage. We need to capitalise. So we did the deal with SMS. Up the top right-hand side is their production headquarters in Hilkenbach, Germany, where we actually opened the plant that you see in the next 3 images. The second image is Mercedes-Benz cells going up into the feeder. The third one from the top is the shredding section. So essentially we can take cells of different formats, different chemistries, different states of charge, and we can safely shred them. It's more like a base metal concentrator. We take out the rubbish, the plastics, the steel casings, the copper and aluminium foil. I mean, that's a valuable rubbish. And we're left with the black powder, and then we pass that over to the hydromet refinery. So we essentially dissolve that in sulfuric acid, and then we use conventional solvent extraction to recover the battery metals as sulfates that can go straight into cathode producers for new cells. I think one of the novel things we use, rather than sort of cheap sodium, we use ammonia for our pH adjustment, and our tailings product is ammonium sulfate fertiliser, which is good because since Vlad moved into the Ukraine, the prices have doubled. So it's a very, very environmentally friendly process, no NOx up into the atmosphere, any water will be potable, and our tailings product is actually a high-grade fertiliser. We've got flexible business models, so we opened our first principal operation, the plant, last Monday. Yep. And essentially what we do there is charge cell makers and car makers a fee to safely dispose of their batteries, make black mass and sell it. Obviously, we're going to put the hydromet refinery. We've got to scale that up. But in the interim, you can sell the black mass just like a mineral concentrate and get very, very good payabilities. But our eye is on the end of life, the big volumes that come back in 2030, 2040, out to 2050. Because while we like recycling and there's feed, in 2030, if we recycled every battery in the world, it'd only produce 10% of that year's feedstocks. It might get to 40 to 50%, but that'll be in 2040. So we're always going to need a lot of mine material, at least for the next 20 to 30 years. So I don't want to ruin anyone's parade there. So to get the volume, the end of life, which is the big ticket, we will look at partnerships, and we've announced a couple of commercial arrangements that see us accessing growing volumes of end of life. And for the really, really large car makers, we will look at plant supply and licensing agreements like we've recently announced with Mercedes-Benz. So I think this one's got the sound, boys. Just a little bit, if you please. So this is Mercedes' announcement that they put out 2-3 weeks ago when we announced the relationship. So we've been selected after a very intense due diligence process, as you can imagine they would put us through. So we've been chosen as their technology partner for battery recycling. Initially, we're going to supply them a 10-tonne per day fully integrated plant and enter into a collaboration for 5 years, testing their latest chemistries and cell formats. It'll be royalty free for the first 10 tonnes a day, but these guys, next decade are going to need upwards of 3,000 tonnes a day capacity. We have some existing licenses out there, and we get a 10% gross revenue royalty off of it. And I can explain to you why a bit later on. So there's what our short-term pipeline is. So we've just opened our own 10-tonne a day stage 1 shredding plant at Hilkenbach in Germany, which is the centre of SMS's manufacturing or construction activities. The next is a 10-tonne integrated plant that we will start construction on mid-year for Mercedes-Benz. Our formal evaluation studies are on a 50-tonne a day, or sort of just under 20,000 tonnes per annum operation in Germany. So the feasibility study for that will be finished mid-year, and investment decisions in the September quarter. And on the 31st of December last year, we announced a deal with Steel Company of Canada. Now, they're a big steel maker that produces steel for the autos in North America. They're moving to electric arc furnaces to produce green steel. They need more scrap. They use about 600,000 tonnes of scrap from cars. That needs to go up to about 3 million tonnes. And there's increasing volumes of batteries that are attached to these cars. So what we've done is license them the technology, and we retain the option to buy into 50% of that business. We expect to consider that investment decision in the September quarter of this year. Initially on one integrated operation, but plans to deploy them across the continent. So I think, as you know, an investment case for us to stay in that business is, there's a clear need from the auto OEMs and the cell makers. I mean, this material just comes out every day and stuff. It needs to be dealt with. We've got an environmentally friendly process that's been nationally recognised as that. We've got 16 national phase patents pending. It's a flexible and robust recycling technology. You can trust Mercedes-Benz and their extensive due diligence to underline that. Very attractive economics. So, our operating costs are around $2,000 a tonne for the batteries. Depending on what we put into it, if you put in your iPhone batteries from consumer electronics, you get about $19,000 recovered value per tonne. And if you get an NMC 811, which is the most cobalt light battery, we recover just under $8,000 per tonne. So it's very, very good margins. Each 50-tonne plant's about 165 million US, and a very short payback. So, we just need to build more and more of these, and that's why we've partnered with SMS. The second project I'll tell you about is our vanadium recovery project. We developed the flow sheet. We are earning into a first vanadium recovery project, earning into that with Critical Metals Ltd, who's an unlisted company that we're the largest shareholder of. And we've also got a second proposed plant. So sort of 70% of the world's vanadium comes from China and Russia. Europe gets all its vanadium from Russia. That's obviously not going to continue into the future. So they need a domestic source of vanadium production, and we need more and more vanadium for battery applications. So lithium vanadium chemistries, vanadium redox batteries, titanium metal alloys. So essentially you've got SSAB, which is the big national steel maker that uses Swedish iron ore pellets, as a lot of these guys do up in that part of the world, that has vanadium in them. Then they use a particular type of furnace and use limestone as a reductant, and the vanadium migrates into this limestone material and forms a very light coloured slag that does go black in time, and that's what you can see there on the right-hand side. So what we essentially have developed is a process that will recover the highest purity vanadium just about ever produced. It's military spec, so we ran a 24-day continuous pilot plant run by Gary Johnson and the guys out at Stratmat. Probably the best pilot plant that we've run, or they've run for us, with some of our input. And, about a 75% recovery. You get 95% recovery if you used acids, but your tailings would be acid generating and you can't get it permitted up there. So we've developed that process, tested it. We've signed a lease on that 50 acres of land with the city of Pori. Very, very attractively priced. It's a fantastic jurisdiction. We were up there 2 weeks ago. You've got access to renewable power, water, heat, enough ample room for tailings. It's a great part of the world. The Finnish are very modest people. It's just like a big mining town. They're just hard workers. They're not too ostentatious and just want to see industries developed. Not far from there, there's a big titanium pigment plant that's going to close down over the coming years with 450 workers, and we need to employ about 75 to 80. So, a fantastic opportunity for us. This is what the plant will look like. We've got to be 3 metres above sea level. I mean, it's a great port, deep. It's the deepest port in Finland, ice-free. In terms of the process, we bring the slag in by barge from Luleå, Rahi and Oxelösund. We stockpile on site. We can have a couple of years stockpile without too much of a drama. We then put that through a couple of stages of grinding and leaching. The process we use is an alkaline leach, so water and sodium carbonate. One of the unique things that we do is we actually capture CO2 from local emissions. It will take about 100,000 tonnes of carbon out of a biomass power station that's owned by the city of Pori. They'll give us free access to that, and it'll be very cheap carbon, and we use that to regenerate the sodium carbonate in that process. It's a gentle leach, and hence why we have to give it a couple of grinds to get the recoveries up to 75%. Then we solve and extract the vanadium out into a solution through all those little banks there. And then we just go through a traditional vanadium recovery circuit, just like every other primary vanadium mine in the world. You desilicate or remove the silicon from it, then you make ammonium metavanadate, and then you put that in a kiln and drive that off to V2O5 powder. So, one of the beauties about our tailings product is we're chemically sequestering 100,000 tonnes of carbonate in it. And we signed an MOU with a NASDAQ-listed company called Betalar that are going to use it for green cement, which is fantastic. And we've also got an MOU, and so that business is underpinned by a supply contract from SSAB to buy 200,000 tonnes a year for 10 years. We're looking to increase that, and we've signed another MOU with a steel producer called H2 Green Steel, and that's for 400,000 tonnes of slag. Our friends at SMS originally created the idea. They are supplying the equipment. Mercedes is a shareholder in H2 Green Steel, as is Volvo. So it's a very friendly little part of the world up there with quite a few of our partners. So because the head grade of the slag's so high, it's the highest grade vanadium stockpiles anywhere in the world. It's 2 or 3 times higher than any concentrate grade that we can make in Australia. And hence we sit down in the bottom quarter of the cost curve. There's some pre-feasibility numbers. The vanadium prices increased substantially since we did the pre-feasibility, and we'll also make that plant much bigger. The feasibility study will be finished 30 June 2022. We give that to SSAB, and then we've given ourselves 6 months to make an investment decision. And then we've got 2 years to then build the plant and to put it into production at 300,000 tonnes per annum throughput. It's not that big of a plant. So really strong fundamentals for low carbon footprint. Like traditional vanadium has sort of 30 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of vanadium. Ours will either be 0 or negative. We piloted it, environmentally friendly. We haven't had any issues. We put it in our EIA, and we expect to get our approvals in September. Very robust economics. You know, we've got a good pipeline for a second, potentially larger plant back up in Sweden for H2 Green Steel, and we've been testing other third-party ores. And we're very, very happy to continue into that business. I think that's 3 minutes left. I'm going to whiz through this. So as you know, I guess as a legacy from owning Mount Marion with the MinRes guys is this technology that we developed when the lithium prices were crap in 2010, 2011. And so, excuse me, I'm COVID negative. So, you know, the need for a technology like this is that Europe, we can see what they need for their battery production in the top left-hand line, as opposed to what they produce locally. So what we need to do is to put merchant lithium conversion into Europe and to bring in the feedstocks from Australia, Canada, Africa, in terms of hard rock, and then from brine sources from South America. And so what we did back then is we adapted the existing chloralkali process, you know, that Coogee Chemicals, you know, has down here, and is, you know, it's a 100-year-old technology around the world. But instead of producing sodium hydroxide and caustic soda, we produce lithium hydroxide. It's not as energy efficient, but I tell you what, the product's worth about 25 times more than caustic. And with MinRes, you know, we've funded this through to semi-pilot. We're currently in the process of ordering the pilot plant so that we can finish an updated Class 3 and then a Class 2 study. It's a beautiful process. We don't use any imported materials, no soda ash, no caustic soda. Essentially all we're doing is purifying with some of our excess product and using electricity to turn the chloride into a hydroxide and doing away with the chemicals. What that means is we can strip out about 2/3 of the OPEX from a traditional brine operation, not so much with the spodumene operation because the spodumene prices are so high, and a fantastic advantage for the capex. And so what we've been able to do is attract Portugal's largest chemical producer, who's part of this enormous conglomerate there that owns banks and hospitals and all sorts of stuff. And they're the biggest chloralkali producer down in that part of the world, and they're rather interested in putting lithium chloride rather than sodium chloride into their chemical plant. So we're running that on a 50-50 basis to fund the evaluation in terms of the next steps. For us, it's essentially running pilot electrolysis trials, both on lithium chlorides that we've developed from spodumene sources, and procuring them from the lithium brine producers, because brine, you know, lithium production from brines is hard. It takes 7 years. Ask anyone that's done it. It's easy to evaporate and make lithium chloride. It's bloody hard to turn that lithium chloride into caustic and into lithium carbonate and then hydroxide. So, you know, its development decision will be towards the end of next year. So I think if I'm going to leave you anything, you know, as a Neometals shareholder, I guess I've seen quite a few of you today. You know, I think you should rest comfortably. You should feel secure. We've still got 120 odd million bucks in cash and investments and no debt. We've got a clear strategy to commercialise the technologies, and we'll continue our partnering model that enables us to develop at scales that you couldn't do yourself. It's enabled us to operate. So in COVID, we've managed to complete the construction of a demonstration plant, engineering studies, and had the opening last Monday, which is great and a credit to our partners. We've got that sort of, you know, a growth potential from projects spawning out of these technologies I don't think you can match from, you know, the traditional mining M&A. It's just not possible. And a fantastic team that, you know, is really committed to the principles of sort of green circular economy. So I think I've hit my time limit. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good day.